welcome. I'm Joe Godwin, and welcome to our debate. It's called Public Service RIP. We're not here to bury anybody or mourn anything. We're here to, in a happy, upbeat way, we've had some feedback that some of the sessions have seemed a bit gloomy, in a positive and exciting and thrilling way, to shed light on the challenges facing the provision of public service content for children. So the background, I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel in a minute, but the background is that children are deserting traditional broadcast public service television, broadcast television, and they're doing that because they can. They've been enabled by the fact that they've got control of their own devices, and they really have deserted it. Public service broadcast TV for school-aged children is watched by a tiny fraction of the 9 million or so potential viewers. So we want to talk about, and we want to hear your views about, does public service content matter? Should we mind this? Should we worry about this? I think most people at the CMC probably think our experience and instincts tell us that high-quality, culturally relevant storytelling for children is a precious cultural asset. It can promote well-being, tolerance, learning, citizenship, social cohesion, and can encourage children to value culture and crave knowledge. I think a lot of people would think public service content for children is still very, very important. But if the 6+ audience are deserting public service children's TV channels in the traditional sense, what is the future for those public service values? How will we get this important content to where children are spending their screen time? How will they find it? And for those of you who are producers, crucially, who's going to pay for it? How's it going to be monetized? And what do children's changing viewing habits mean for parents, producers, children, politicians, and the UK as a whole? So that's a very simple question that we're going to answer in the next 55 minutes. And to do that, we have assembled possibly the greatest set of brains to ever debate something at CMC, and I'm now going to introduce them. So, to my left, Maddie Moat is a BAFTA award-winning presenter and YouTube filmmaker who's passionate about sustainability, curiosity, STEM, education. She's best known for CBeebies, well, you might debate this. She's possibly best known for CBeebies Maddie Do You Know, as well as her lockdown learning live show, Let's Go Live, and award-winning podcast, Maddie's Sound Explorers, and she's recently hosted Discovery plus Magnolia's Make Yourself at Home, as well as her own YouTube channel. Is that all correct?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Very good. Cedric Petipa is an EdHec, is that how you pronounce that acronym? Which is a French business school. He's an EdHec business school graduate. He started his career in feature film production, international sales, home entertainment in France and Germany. Cedric worked for 12 years at Paris-based animation studio Gaumont Animation in business affairs, marketing and TV sales director. And he joined YouTube in 2014, collaborating on the launch of YouTube Kids and its rollout in the UK, Ireland, France, and Germany. Is that all correct?
That's all correct.
Very good. It's all going very, very well.
Including the pronunciation.
Oh, merci, monsieur. Next is Lucy Murphy. She is Director of Kids Content for Sky in the UK and Ireland. She's responsible for Sky Kids content across all platforms, including the new Sky Kids channel, which launched this year. Hooray! We'll come back, we'll try that again later. Recent commissions have included award-winning shows such as the preschool animation Pip and Posy, the BAFTA-winning news show FYI, a spin-off from the iconic Morph series, The Very Small Creatures, animated series The Brilliant World of Tom Gates, and a drama series for older children, Jacqueline Wilson's Little Darlings. And as that slide shows, actually Sky are doing an awful lot of stuff in the world of public service-ish-esque content for kids. And we'll come back to that later. Cool. And last but not least, was that largely correct, Lisa?
Absolutely, yeah.
Just fact-checking as we go. And last but not least, Emily Horgan. Emily is an independent media consultant. Do take time to read what she's written on this slide. It's quite enlightening. Independent media consultant and former Disney exec. She has an extensive background in managing the intersection of content distribution and consumer products for household name franchises, including Star Wars, Marvel, Disney, and Mickey Mouse. She's written a great deal about the kids' media space on Netflix and YouTube, as well as how to run kids' franchises in the new streaming world. And as you might guess from the statement bottom right on her slide, she's based in Dublin. And was that all correct?
That was all correct. Great job, Joe.
So would you welcome our panel? So as I say, despite the title of the session, we don't know what the answer to this is. We're going to have a conversation about the challenges around what we believe public service content for children is and should be, and how in a world of fragmented viewing across many platforms, how we ensure kids still find this content and value it. I read something very interesting in Ofcom's Media Live study that the vast majority of children that Ofcom spoke to for this study, if they want to find out a fact, they search on TikTok for the answer. Now, to kids and parents, that may be no surprise, but it's a very different way of finding your facts and your news. And a lot of kids told Ofcom that they used TikTok and YouTube to find out their news. So that's the context of the world of public service content for children we're looking in. Just to start off, and this is for everybody, children rarely are choosing to watch broadcast TV in the volume numbers that they have done in the past. I think Ofcom said it was down 20% between 2021 and 2022. Why do you think kids are drifting away from traditional linear broadcast content for children? Lucy, is that one you'd like to take?
I'm very happy to take it. I think there is a drift. It's certainly not for kids 7 and under. They're still watching linear, and that's exactly why we launched a linear channel, because we noticed that actually viewing was still high to linear channels for the under 7s. 6 and overs have a very fragmented media life. It's not just fragmented in terms of the platforms that they watch and engage with. It's fragmented in terms of the devices that they use to access that content. And if you look at the kind of explosion of those fragments across the average afternoon after school for a 6+, there's all sorts of demands and exciting and engaging and interactive platforms. So the question is, for us is very much not, oh dear, how can we get them back? But, where are they? What are they doing? Why are they there? And what is our response to that? And I think that's the really important bit. It's not the quick, get them back. It's where can we meet kids on their terms with brilliant premium content that they will really love, and that speaks to the communities within this massive word called audience, which actually doesn't really mean much now. What is audience? It's so, again, like kids' media lives, it's fragmented, right? So that's our challenge.
Very nicely summed up. Emily, what do you think the reason for children not wanting to sit down and watch things that are called kids' channels is?
Yeah, I think it's the conversations kids are having and kids are exposed to these days, I think, are far more like the depth of the things that they're being exposed to in the news and all that kind of stuff they go deep. And I think it can be really hard to go deep on some of those issues in a kids show. And that's not to say that they don't want to laugh and have fun as well at the same time. But, I think where you see some of the streamers pick up that audience a little bit is in shows that aren't in the kids section. Shows like Stranger Things, shows that sit just above, that have those themes and have those conversations, and sometimes have lots of laughs in them too. And I think that's where this older audience kind of gravitates towards, because those are the kind of conversations they want to be having, and it would be difficult for, it can be difficult for, say, like a brand like Disney, who I worked for many years, to kind of get into the nitty-gritty about, racism or gender identity, or, within that kind of safe kids space. But those are the kind of stories that, some of the stories that they're looking to find answers in, and that's why there is that kind of gravitation. It's also that, they've so much on offer, right? Like, it's that fragmented thing, and it's like, if you're going to watch television as a grazing field is not necessarily as relevant as it was, because there's lots of other things to be doing. So if they're going to be watching telly, they want it to be something, that's that's worth turning up for, and that's got that kind of the quality that, like, has, again, that conversation, and so they're a bit more, they're pickier about what they'll turn up for, I think.
To add to what was said before in terms of why are children leaving in the first place, this wouldn't necessarily be true for why children will go to Netflix, but in terms of them choosing social media channels, YouTube, let's say, over more traditional linear television, I think that there are just other platforms that provide more authentic experiences for these young viewers, and I think it's exactly the same for adults. The reason that we might choose to scroll through Instagram or perhaps browse through YouTube, it's the same for a child. I think that young children want to feel like they're being spoken to. I think they want to feel like they are part of a community, that there's a gang that they can join, and that there is somewhat of a relationship that feels real, and I think that there is more opportunity for those authentic experiences, even if it is an illusion, for children on those platforms. I think an example would be, so my nephew, he's 6 years old, so he's just on the cusp. He could watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but he chooses to watch Ninja Kids on YouTube because there he gets to watch a family of kids who train together, they try to become ninjas together, they go on adventures, they shoot their own content, they talk to the viewer like they're one of their friends. And for him, that's more appealing, that's more sticky, so that's where he'd rather be. And I think that's something that potentially you don't see so much of on linear television.
No, absolutely. And just also to say, there is always a danger in people like me having this sort of conversation that it turns into a nostalgic old fart fest. Call it out. And Lucy sort of started calling it out a bit before we came on the panel, but I'm absolutely clear we're here to get
I hadn't eaten my bag of Grimm, so I'm afraid.
Remember, we're going to be very cheerful and upbeat, but I think there is always a danger. I'm nearly 60. I've been, my media childhood was BBC One, BBC One, ITV, Go Outside. Those were my media choices. So I'm happy for anyone on the panel or in the audience to say, oh, get with it, Daddy.
I won't say that.
Actually, if anyone does say that, there'll be trouble. But, Cedric, what's it feel like from YouTube's point of view in terms of why children are possibly deserting what we think of as traditional public service channels and spending more time on YouTube than any other platform, I think?
On YouTube, and I mean, YouTube is no longer the new kid around the block. Okay. I think.
You're 18, you can vote.
That's the platform, 9 years for YouTube Kids as well. So to go back to like the kids label, I think it's normal that at some point, they grow out of the Happy Meals, and we see it on YouTube Kids, like 6 and plus. They're less on the platform than the younger ones. But one of the reasons I think why they go to those platforms, as Maddie was saying, as Lucy, Emily were saying, is they're looking for something to engage with something that speaks to themselves. So it's very much looking for those public service values we're talking about. They're looking for representation. They're looking for quality of entertainment. They're looking for identity, and they're looking for personal growth in learning content. So I think, they want breadth. You mentioned depth as well of information and knowledge. David Olusoga alluded to it. Their insatiable thirst for detail. And I think that's something that should be encouraged.
But they do also want to do the grown-up equivalent of watch Below Deck, right? Like they want to and watch Love Island, where it's not always, like when we're talking public service, I don't see the BBC commissioning, the next series of Love Island anytime soon. Like, right, it's that kind of candy floss.
And pure entertainment.
And why shouldn't they? They are like us.
Yeah, get the same, the same dopamine hit. It's exactly the same feeling whether you're an adult or a child. Children need to zone out just as much as we do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that most of the public service broadcasts in the UK, and although Sky aren't sort of officially a public service broadcaster, they're doing a lot, have always provided lots of entertainment, lots of animation, lots of fun. Is it just that there's so much choice now that there's more fun to be had elsewhere? Make you feel more grown up by doing social media? Well, there's no shortage of entertainment on our public service kids' TV, is there?
No, there's definitely entertainment, and that's maybe one of the concerns, and the reason for debate is that we see kids go to social platforms with content that we, as kids media industry practitioners, consider not very good or not very healthy or wholesome.
Yeah.
You know, it's pure candy floss. There's no, like I always say that the ideal is chocolate covered broccoli. But like, you know, it needs to be appealing, but it needs to have health.
Yeah.
And that's something unique in the kids industry, is that we all actually have a public service remit, and it's not just down to the BBC and Sky, or, you know, Sky takes that seriously. I know, you know, Disney and Nick, like, they try to make content that's for good, but when kids go to those platforms that are unregulated, there's a lot of content on there that, you know, is not for good, you know, and even though it gives a dopamine hit,
Exactly.
it's actually harmful, you know, and even if it's not overtly, even if it's not porn, you know, like, even if it's not overtly harmful, it's still like, you know, it's got nothing to it, and it's, you know, it's attention spans, and it's that kind of thing. And I think that's what the real concern is.
One thing that you mentioned, I think storytelling has changed a little bit. Like one of the things I struggled the most with when I joined YouTube was understanding the appetite for gaming content and like watching other kids playing games. It's like, what? How? But kids want to see themselves, they want to hear themselves.
And not necessarily mediated by well-meaning old farts, which is maybe what's happened.
But they want, you know, and that's, we've leaned into that very much. And, you know, because we also know that parents are worried about the platforms their kids are on. So for us to lean into that, gaming walkthroughs, and do it in a way that gets access to really good games and with great talent, it felt to us like a really good thing to do, and it has proven to be. We are keeping our 6+ audience because we're making shows like Let's Game and Challenge Dan, and we can then use all the things that we have. You know, we also always talk about sort of the levers we can pull. You know, Sky VIP is a fantastic resource to us, so we can run a competition to challenge Dan TDM and play against him. And for a kid, that's really super exciting to get to play with Dan. And we get tens of thousands of entries for that kind of competition, to really talking to the audience, meeting them where they are, giving them what they want, and also making parents feel.
So are you managing to sustain a TV audience? Do you think we're prematurely worrying about the end of kids' TV?
No, I don't think we're. I think that's the word. We're not. It's TV.
Yeah.
You know, we're a media conference. We're not a teleconference, and I've said that several times this week, and I passionately believe it. All of us program makers all want to make good shows, and we all want to find our audience, and that's the bit that we've got to get better at, is finding an audience for the communities that the kind of all kids sitting and watching the same thing at the same time. That's quite tricky for, you know, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, because they have all got interests developing that are quite specific and particular. And we have opportunities to make content for those specific loves and interests in communities. We just have to make sure we find them and get that content there.
Do you think, I think it's always been the case that children reach a stage where they don't want to be associated with things for children. Do you think that's something that's happening younger? Are children running away from brands called kids? Is that part of YouTube's appeal?
Well,
sorry, Maddie,
No,
come back.
sorry.
No, go for it.
You go first, then I'll
Okay.
I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with the word kids. I think if you look at some of the most successful family brands on YouTube, you know, they have kids in the title. A lot of people will go to speak to Jamie next, listen to Jamie. Her channel is called Cosmic Kids Yoga. It does extremely well. But I do think that children, especially when they get to 6+, have a really strong whiff of when something's being heavily curated, when choice is being taken away from them. And I think that's when the likes of YouTube Kids is potentially less successful, because children know that there's all this choice out there, and they know that they're getting a very small portion of it. And I think that's the same for some other platforms too. I think when you know that there's choice, naturally you're going to be curious to go elsewhere. So I think that's the difference. Sorry.
Kids, brands, is it something kids are running away from more than they used to? Well, they are, as Maddie says, they are now able to get
I think
away
they're
from
running away from brands. And, you know, they know where their content is. They might not know the platform it's on.
Yeah.
They can search for it and find it. And, you know, the affinity to the BBC or the affinity to ITV or Sky, you know, it's the content is what they want, not
But you do see, though, Lucy, that, well, and I've definitely seen in research that, you know, Netflix and YouTube are both very appealing brands, even of themselves, for kids. And Netflix have managed to keep that coolness, you know what I mean? You know, they've always, ever since they've kind of reached a critical mass of awareness, they've always been there in the UK kids as a brand that's seen as very aspirational, or seen as like a cool place to be, a cool place to hang out. I would be in the camp that if you put kids in the title of your brand and you're going to 6+, that it's not something I'd advise you to do, and I have seen that. I have seen that in the past in different things. So seven down, don't worry. But you know, that's just my experience of it. That I have seen that be kind of like kryptonite. Yeah. You know, again, the Netflix YouTube presences for 6+, it was Netflix Futures, now it's Netflix After School. The question then is, what do you put in if you're not putting kids? Like, how do you make, what's a cool thing to say? I don't know, I'm not 7, so, like, you know, that's another question you need to answer.
And a lot of what we commission that could be deemed public service content, we do, you know, and I don't know if it's possible to go back to that slide.
It is.
Because it's really helpful to just talk about specifics. This is just a range of what we make for 6+. And I've put entertainment at the beginning because it's really important. It is the bedrock of what we do. We're an entertainment company. But choosing wisely because Sky is in a really interesting position, and unlike any other broadcaster, in that our platform hosts all the kids' channels. So we've got Cartoon Network, we've got Nickelodeon, we've got, you know, Netflix on the platform. So for me, when I'm looking at where those spaces are, Dodo is a British comedy about your first year at secondary school. It's about those moments of crises when there's no lock on the toilet and you need a poo. I mean, it's those really relatable moments that kids sort of get. It's very funny. Let's Game we've talked about. But then if you look at, you know, news and factual, Sky is one of the biggest news organisations in the world. Of course we're going to have news for kids, because if we want kids that grow up understanding about the world and, importantly, feeling they have a voice in it, then making a news show for kids presented by kids felt like a very natural thing. And we knew that sticking that on demand was not going to get the audience it needed. So we have a partnership with First News, which is the biggest newspaper for kids in the country. It goes free into schools every week. It sits on Sky News, which is a free-to-air news channel, and gets played 6 times every week. It sits on YouTube. And so we've found ways to connect with kids in the space. So at school, kids are really open to this, and it's news presented for them, by them, in a very unique way. We've made shows like 6 Ways to Save Our Planet, which was for COP26, and again, very much used in schools and made available on YouTube. We've made lots of arts shows, Abracadopera. Now, who would have thought that Sky Kids would make a 40-minute documentary about opera introduced through the power of rap? Not many people. But we did that in conjunction with the ENO and made it for Access All Arts, which is a fantastic initiative set up by my colleagues in Sky Arts. And that goes to 6,000 primary schools this year.
I think it's really interesting. I think it might also be a revelation to a lot of people, just the breadth of stuff Sky make. I'm not going to let you talk about all the other titles.
But do you see what I mean? You've got to make the shows, but don't expect kids to sit and watch them on telly, because they won't.
No, absolutely. And I think if somebody from Newsround was on here, they'd say the model in terms of schools and multi-platform consumption of Newsround is absolutely the key to doing that. Yeah. We were talking about kids and kids' brands. We were talking about how if you want to get the stuff that we agree is good for kids under their noses, you have to be clever and more sort of pluralistic about how you do it. Can I talk about talkability? Because that's really important for all kids' content, isn't it, is getting kids talking about it. What are the challenges of generating talkability when everybody's doing their own thing? Because, again, when this old fart was a kid, if you weren't watching Blue Peter, you were watching Magpie, and if you weren't watching Magpie, you'd been very naughty, or your dad was watching the horse racing.
What's Magpie, Joe?
It was like Blue Peter, but different. And that was all there was to talk about.
But with better-looking presenters.
Cooler, I'm afraid. Well, I think this is another session. Were you a Blue Peter person or a Magpie person? But how talkability, would you agree, is it important? And what are the challenges of generating talkability when every child is doing a different sort of permutation of media consumption?
I think depth of the offering is key to talkability, and I think in streaming, and like the big streamers out, like the great cancellation of last summer, I think the respect for a depth of a content offering for kids is, you know, it's kind of being a little bit forgotten, and I think that's where YouTube content is, you know, leading the way in terms of like YouTube channels are setting up, like Maddie's channel, that has depth. And it's not that kids will have watched, or maybe some kids may have watched all of Maddie's content. It's awesome, but like you don't have to have watched all of it. So somebody could say, "Oh, did you see that Maddie video?" But they know the context because there's been that depth, there's been that amount of content to consume. And I think when we're talking about like more traditional formats, like the you know, like animated series, like Netflix going out with 7 episodes, 8 episodes. You know, a season order is 20 episodes and then it never gets renewed. I think that's something that can definitely hurt talkability in my view. To become a fan, there needs to be a depth of content to be a fan about.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's less about talkability and more about shareability.
Yeah.
And I think something when I'm coming up with ideas is I will think to myself, will this be shared? And for me, that, you know, that the audience who are likely to share the content, they are parents, they're home educators. I'm not necessarily looking for the kids to be sharing the videos themselves. I don't think children tend to do that, if I'm being honest with you. But I am thinking, will this be picked up by blogs? Does it have a hooky enough title or subject matter that is going to be picked up and make somebody go, huh, that's interesting, and worth putting on a website elsewhere? So I definitely think tapping into something that is shareable is really, really important, especially when you're looking at platforms like YouTube. Talkability, I don't know. I'm not sure if people are necessarily so chatty about what they watch on that YouTube space. I think it's more of a personal experience.
Shareability, talkability?
I think talkability is important, like, as an industry, to make our brands known.
Yeah.
But that's it. Yeah, shareability. And shareability, I mean, you can talk and share. It's kind of the same thing.
And also, the Ofcom Media Lives thing was very interesting if people get the chance to read it. Kids are most of the time watching 2 things at once and doing something else at the same time, which I think is, again, to older people, slightly mind-boggling. But you can be watching.
Well, they're watching
and
it on
talking
1.5 speed so that they can watch more.
Indeed.
There's that. There's multi-format now. Like, you can access, you can talk about your content in depth, in different lengths as well. But yeah, if we talk about the end of talkability, it would be the end of fandom almost, which is not happening. Yeah.
I think really the key to making something, the talkability and that shareability, is to make something that people need, that is something that people want and need at that present moment in time. And I think something that myself and Greg were able to tap into during lockdown was our series Let's Go Live. That was a total pivot for the type of content that I make on my YouTube channel. So we went from making travel, curiosity-driven videos, and suddenly we were making a daily live show. And it got spoken about and it got shared because it was exactly what people needed at that time. So I think that, you know, taking into consideration what's happening in the world and making something that is actually going to resonate with people here and now is really important, which is why the Saving the Planet, you know, series makes sense if it's coming out with COP26. So I think if you're able to respond to what is happening in the here and now, as opposed to what happened a few years ago, I think that's always going to be beneficial.
Because kids are going to search for it as well. Like, so they use now TikTok, but YouTube was for the longest time the #1 search engine before Google. So it's the start of the content journey as well.
If we're talking about a world where what we think of as traditional public service producers and broadcasters are trying to get their content onto other platforms, your platform, for instance, Cedric, isn't regulated in any way, whereas the public service broadcasters and the other licensed broadcasters are very heavily regulated. Do you think that's going to change, needs to change? I mean, I can guess what you might answer, but it is a very different world to the world of licensed, regulated television, isn't it?
I think what most of the people want, and including people at Google, YouTube who are parents, is to level up the playing field. So I think like regulation, as it comes, sort of benefits everybody, including businesses.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Let's talk about the risks to the audience of moving from a very historically tightly regulated world of licensed broadcast television to a bit more of a free-for-all. Again, the Ofcom Media Live's research shows that a lot of children, possibly a majority, cannot always tell the difference between fiction and fact in terms of stuff. What should we be worried about, and what can we do about that?
Not just children that can't tell.
Yeah.
What did I say?
No, it's not just children that can't.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah. And that is a challenge for producers of public service content, isn't it?
Actually, I think children are probably more able than us to tell what is fact and what is fiction, because they understand the tone of how it's said to them, and they've evolved in that world, and they hear parents talking about misinformation and polarization and things like this. So I think whilst it's a surprise to us, it no longer is for kids.
I mean, in response to your question, what can we do about it? What can we do about the fact that there are these, huge, scary places out there that our children, just wander into? Not much immediately, I think, is the answer. But I think that what we can do is try to level up or give platforms to content creators who are making really good, enriching content and making sure that they can be seen and that they are visible on these platforms, I think is really helpful. But also I think it is important that your traditional media, your public service media is there to set a gold standard so that everybody can try and meet that. And I think this, that can't go away because this is the gold standard so that everybody else has something to meet. If this dies, then this just becomes a complete no man's land.
That's a very interesting point. And I wonder, a lot of people in this room are producers who make their living from making content and selling it to broadcasters. If commissioned broadcast television does fade away and it is mostly YouTube and unregulated platforms, I wonder whether that will mean there'll be less money being spent on it and what that means for producers.
I can only talk from my own experience, which is finding ways to fund a YouTube channel. I'd say that, so my public service values that I've sort of, gained from years of working with CBeebies and the BBC is definitely something that's ingrained in me, probably inherently there in the first place as well, but it's something that I brought over to the YouTube channel. And I think, creating public service content on YouTube, it involves a little bit more bit of creativity. There's a few more challenges. When Made for Kids was introduced, it made it simpler. I can now mark my videos as Made for Kids. That kind of gives them a stamp. It puts certain restrictions on the video. So I know that it's now a safer space, as much as it possibly can be. But it does make financing harder. So that's involved that level of creativity. And I think something that I've had to realise in making educational videos or factual entertainment, if you like, is to stop looking for traditional sort of forms of funding, to stop going to the obvious kids spaces as well. So that might be toys, snacks, I don't know, family holiday destinations, but actually to approach people who may not have the skills to make content or create outreach, educational outreach for children, but don't have the skills to do so. So actually most of my funding comes from totally non-kid spaces. So I tend to be funded by science organisations, historical organisations instead. So I think it just involves just seeing who's going to want video content for children, and you just have to be flexible with what you make.
Interesting. Going back to the point that you made about how you find stuff. Cedric, do you think there'd be an argument, because on your platform, on Sky's platform, the law dictates that the public service broadcasters get prominence on the EPG, right at the top of it. Is there an argument to say we need to have some sort of regulation to help kids find public service content on platforms like YouTube? Is there a prominence opportunity?
I think they're already prominent, like public service broadcasters. They just by the brands that they've been, especially in the UK, especially the BBC. So I do think they have that prominence compared to, you know, your starting creator and that parents don't know of. Yeah, no, I think then they should use that opportunity to potentially curate more content that is not necessarily their own and operated, like be the curator of everything that is out there on YouTube and other platforms. Yeah.
The curation thing, I think, is really interesting because, you know, what's the business model behind excellent curation? And obviously, like Skye, you're a curator of great content, and people pay you for that, and it is actually a skill, and it is a real value that you bring to your audience. You're bringing them quality, you're bringing them safety, and I think that curation, like a business model for that kind of curation on somewhere like YouTube, when you're not, you know, how do you find a way to make that monetizable? Obviously, you're not making the content, but finding a way to kind of put value on that. I mean, it feels like we've been dismantling, you know, human programming for the past decade, and suddenly to come to the conclusion that actually, you know, people picking stuff is actually, you know, the most powerful in terms of connecting with people, but also, you know, there's a lot of value there in terms of picking the right stuff, picking safe stuff. So trying to find a business model behind that, I think that would be. Can you do that? Cedric, can you do that?
You mean like the BBC becoming a place to start, let's say, curating examples of, let's say, YouTube content creators who do good things?
I think Common Sense Media in the US is a great resource. I know you guys have their ratings on their channel. Like, I use that as a resource all the time of like, and they have that nuance, right? It's not just like a PG-13 or like, you know, that kind of set television rating. It's like
very detailed.
What do our reviewers think? We think Wednesday, which is an adult show on Netflix, is 10+. What do parents think? Parents think it's more like 11. What do kids think? Kids think it's 8+. And it's that nuance, I think, is really important. And there's a lot of, they're a non-profit. There's a lot of work that's gone into that. I think it's, you know, it's a resource for the industry. But trying to find a way that, you know, that getting that kind of nuance into the selections that people are making, like the offering that people are being given in terms of content, is important.
So is there a possibility on platforms like YouTube and TikTok to have more human curation to help surface public service content for kids? Or do you think it's surfaced and discoverable enough as it is?
I mean, we can always ask for more. We do have a level of editorial input on YouTube Kids, not necessarily on main YouTube. Yeah, I think, and then when it comes to the business model, that's another question.
Yeah, no.
But when it comes to
you're already sharing
financing,
revenue. I get it.
Yeah, but the financing, which is, you know, the real issue, is you have to be creative. And I would point everyone to this morning's list of solutions that Deirdre Brennan gave everyone in her session.
In another session, which I wasn't in, so I may be misquoting it, I think Patricia from the BBC suggested that we could be more French about these things and say, if you want to make money in this country, you can provide some of the content our audiences need. Is that a route you'd think was a good idea? Because it sounds a very good idea to me.
Cedric's going to agree that becoming more French is a good thing.
Yeah, and I'm glad it wasn't suggested by myself, but yeah, I mean, that's a good reminder of, you know.
I think the key thing about the French thing is that actually content has been outputted through that quota. That's just excellent content that connects with kids. Like PJ Masks, one of the biggest preschool brands of the past decade, new IP, completely original. Miraculous Ladybug is another great example of, you know, it's not just done because it's French, it's also done because it's excellent and kids connect with it. And I think finding those things and the business model can justify it is where you get success when you're dealing with in a capitalist world.
Right, so we probably should be more French, really, shouldn't we?
Except Cedric.
Give it a go.
Try, Cedric, that would be great. Let's talk about what this all means for producers. I mean, if we're sat here in 5 years' time talking about the state of public service content for children, or even 3 years' time, what are the risks for producers, and what are the things we could be doing to minimise those risks? Because a lot of people, as I say here, do make their living creating content and selling it to people to show on television or other channels. So in terms of risks to producers and opportunities, Maddie, what do you think it might feel like in a few years' time for producers of kids' content?
Okay, so if you have producers who are used to pitching for your typical public service television spots, and they're thinking, right, we want to try something new, move over to a platform such as YouTube. Of course, a big risk is funding. Where are you going to get that money? So I think, well, the first thing is to look at creative options for funding and sponsorship. Rethink your content, so perhaps you're not calling it factual entertainment anymore, but you're considering it as outreach instead. I just think that shift in opinion is really helpful. But I would love to see more opportunities for especially independent creators, small producers who are looking to get started, who are really well-meaning, want to create public service content with those values. And to see some kind of funding scheme or some kind of grant put in place to help people who don't have an existing audience elsewhere or who don't have a big IP to help them launch a new channel. Because if you're starting from scratch, it's really, really, really hard these days. So I do think it would be great to see some sort of funding or support being put in place.
Lucy, what do you think the world of public service content for kids will feel like in 3 or 5 years' time? And is there anything we could be doing now to make that a better situation?
Well, I think the world will feel like a different place in 3 to 5 years' time. And the tech and platform availability is accelerating at such an enormous rate. You know, it's hard to future gaze, but I do think going back to that point you made about curation and the importance of curation, I think actually that is going to become even more critical than it is now. And discoverability, it's, you know, those are the things to focus on. And to bring in what Maddie was saying about those content partnerships, you know, you've been really smart in connecting with organisations that really support what you're trying to do. And there's a really great relationship between, you know, they get a lot from what you do and you get a lot from what they can give. And I think for producers, it's thinking about those non-traditional routes to funding and really thinking hard about the platform opportunities that are there and what you can create that works for a specific community on a specific platform.
I think it's really easy to sort of like get a bit downbeat about the fact that we've got to find new ways to find money. But actually, it's a really positive thing. So the fact that I'll now approach or be approached by organisations who don't know what they're doing in the space, but they know, like, for example, so I'm about to start making a 6-part series on YouTube about materials with a science research organisation in the UK. They came to me. Their goal is to educate young people about these materials. So I've now got to come up with some sort of creative, fun project that is going to meet their goals, but is also going to deliver something that my audience will expect and will feel authentically Maddie on the channel. I only think that's a good thing. So rather than me approaching somebody saying, hey, I've got this content stream I want to make, will you fund it? It's more, what can I do for you? Okay, brilliant, that's your message, great, let me come up with something that's going to work for both of us. And it just makes better content.
Very exciting. We did say we wouldn't be miserable, so
no.
There are some really exciting opportunities. Cedric, in terms of funding, what do you think the world of kids' content, how is it going to develop and change? Because at the moment, a lot of what we call public service content for children is paid for either by companies like Sky. There was the fantastic Young Audiences Content Fund from the BFI, which helped a lot of the commercial public service broadcasters create content. Where's all this money going to come from in a world which comes off the TV and off public service broadcasters?
I think we need to incentivize broadcasters to keep investing into this content. I do want to remind, though, that YouTube contributes to the creator economy in general. It's not the same model, but it does, and it's a growing figure year on year. So, but again, you have to be creative, and I think for producers, which was like your initial questions, it's first of all, as Deirdre was saying, get out of the 52x11 format that you need to fund.
Yeah, genres and formats have just exploded, and that for
that's an
content
opportunity.
creator is a huge opportunity to come to, because the sort of the restrictions of formats and
but is there a little bit of
are gone?
Can I say something controversial?
By all means.
Go
We
on.
should.
Finally. Now, is there a little bit of snobbery, though, right? Like that it's like, if I'm either doing broadcast or it's nothing, you know, and I think that's disingenuous. The kids are on YouTube, that's where they are, and getting the format right and understanding that as a platform is something I see that's overlooked quite often with producers that I'm speaking to from time to time. That you know, they want the TV show and they want it to connect with kids, but kids are not on TV anymore. That's what we're talking about. Like getting onto YouTube, finding a way to do it. It doesn't have to be high end. It can be a little bit cheap. It can be a little bit dirty, but it can still really connect with kids. Yeah. And really embracing that and learning from it and looking at it, I think is a huge opportunity.
I think it's a generational thing. I think if you were to sit some kids in here and listen to this conversation, they'd probably laugh. You know, they'd be like, "What are they talking about?" Like, it doesn't matter if it's, like, if it's this way or if it's this way.
And you know, it's not that they're not watching TV or you know, they're watching movies and they're watching you know, there's plenty of shows that families want to sit and watch together that are what one might call traditional media. So they are watching, but I just think for some content you've got to be more layered in that approach and make it available everywhere.
But it's also then an opportunity for the producer to go, you know what, I tried this on YouTube and I got 30 million views. Are you interested as a commissioner? Yeah, you're definitely going to be interested as a commissioner. And then they're bringing that data
and we have acquired many of those.
They're bringing that data piece
creators.
That's what you live and breathe. It's
and so has the BBC, by the way, done. Like, YouTube is a breeding ground for talent discovery. Then they take premium.
Yeah, exactly. Indeed. And you're a living example of that.
Yeah, kind of. I guess sort of I started making videos on YouTube, but I was working both as a content creator, but I was also presenting for brands on YouTube. So I think I was one of the first presenters on CBeebies to come from that YouTube space. But I think I was being trusted at that time, which was about 10 years ago now, simply because I had also been working as a presenter. I wasn't just coming from a place of being a vlogger in my bedroom. So I think that's why I got fortunate at the time that I had experience doing both.
I've just had, I think, Jackie, we should do this debate again next year. Same panellists, but we should have a row of children sat there.
Yeah,
I think they'd laugh.
They should be wired up to things to see whether they're paying attention, awake or laughing.
Make it shorter, put it in vertical.
Yeah. Okay, so that's next year. In a minute, I'm going to open this up to your questions, so do think of them to speak to the panel, and we'll do that in just a minute. The last thought for the moment from the panel. About to go through Parliament is the Media Bill, which will become the Media Act, which is the biggest change to legislation around media and content for 20 years. Is there anything that you think we should seize the opportunity to do to help protect children's content? Because at the moment, the Media Bill doesn't really mention children's content much, other than in the context of the traditional public service broadcasters and Ofcom's powers to regulate BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, S4C. Do you think we should be, we've been talking about how we need to see the world in a different way, do you think there's an opportunity here that needs to be seized with this upcoming legislation? Lucy, what do you think?
Well, inevitably I'm going to say yes, because I do think there is a slightly, you know, the Media Bill and Ofcom looking at public service broadcasters isn't necessarily
so retro,
engaging enough with public service content, and I think that's the shift that I would love to see.
And honestly, all kids' content should be of a public service in nature, because you have to mind the audience. You have to be careful of them. And
it matters. It matters.
Yeah.
So you'd be saying to politicians, stop thinking in the old-fashioned way about the specific public service broadcasters and think about children's content more broadly.
Who isn't saying that to them, though? Like, why is it even being allowed to go so far as a draft without that, like, that?
Well, unless I've misread it, it doesn't say any more than...
No, I know it doesn't. No, I know.
Broadcasting.
Circulated beforehand.
Yeah.
What would you or YouTube want to see the Media Bill? What could the opportunity be useful to strengthen the value and the quality of stuff for kids, Cedric?
I think so. I'll come back to that leveling the playing field between broadcast platforms, media, children's media in general. I personally would like more attention onto just the topic of children.
Absolutely.
And that's across the board.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all here talking about this. We're passionate. It's still a small industry. It's hard to make people that are not in this industry care about it. even though everyone's, like most people are parents.
Hear, hear.
No, that's a very, very good point. Maddie, if you had your hand on the pen writing the media bill, what would it say?
I mentioned funding already. I think it'd be great to see some funding put in place for...
So a renewed, even bigger young audiences content fund. And
but also I'd like to see some emphasis placed on moderation. I don't know what it's currently saying, but I think something that these other platforms provide is a really great opportunity to talk with your audience on a live basis. I think in a world where people want to build relationships, build communities, be part of a community, I think that liveness is really important, but that is scary and also tricky on other platforms because those live conversations, I think, should be moderated. And I think that's something that I would like to see really carefully thought about in a way that isn't restrictive, but is done in a way that is caring and loving for the children in the audience.
That's also really helpful, and I think what the CMF will do is take some of these thoughts and everybody else's thoughts into the things we're saying to politicians as the media bill.
It's tough. It's like, you want to see things put in place to make, the world a safer place for children, but equally every time things are put in place, it only creates more restrictions. So it'd be nice for that to be taken into account to make it possible to still make stuff.
I think your point, Cedric, about just banging the drum for children's content producers, children's content creators is so important because there's so little knowledge outside our industry, which is amazing given children aren't exactly a minority. So, I think that's a very valid point.
How do we do it?
Let's see if anyone here's got the answer or even got a question. If you'd like to ask a question, you raise your hand, a microphone will come to you. Don't speak before it does. And ideally, say who you are.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Aista. I'm working at Lithuanian Public Broadcaster as kids and youth content director, and I will start it with the joke which is popular between teens about TikTok. They say that you go on TikTok to watch small, short videos, and then you end up watching the whole movie cut it in 20 little, pieces, of course, illegally.
Of course.
So, and recently we started 2 YouTube channels as a public broadcaster for kids, and actually we were struggling to have an agreement with producers and bigger animation studios to let them, for us to show movies or series on YouTube. And because we think, of course, you need to create original content for the platforms, and it's very important. But we would love to show the series, because for kids, as you already told, it doesn't matter where to watch, and YouTube is something natural for them. As as I'm from the smaller country, I see that these rules are dictated by the bigger countries like UK and Germany and France, and like bigger producers, they would let's say, show only 2 series on YouTube, and then, link to the public broadcaster platforms.
I'm going to be really sorry, because we're very short of time.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask a question? Or your points are very useful and very well, but I'm going to move on, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. So the question is, what do you think about it? Is it possible, to have like better agreements and to show these series or movies on YouTube also?
I think it's a complaint that that I hear both sides, broadcasters and producers, but it's possible to share content. We've seen it with PJ Mask, where Disney was showing it, and then E1 was taking it. We're seeing it right now with Bluey.
They're complex sets of negotiations, and so we're a pay TV company. The value for us is in having all of the episodes behind the paywall, but actually putting some episodes out into the wild is a really, really good thing. But it's that balance, and it's that, the point at which how much is too much, and, we're feeling our way.
Yeah, the balance is an opportunity, though, and it's like what you're talking about, and I hear that complaint quite a lot. It's just that kind of retro way of licensing. It's like, exclusivity is the value of content, and actually, particularly on YouTube, like that's where kids are. and if kids are engaging, everybody benefits. You know, when kids sample
but if
stuff on
all
YouTube,
of it is on YouTube,
oh yeah,
it becomes difficult to fund the next brilliant series.
My watch has just told me to stand up, which must mean it's an hour since I did. A couple more questions. Another question. There's a hand down here. Are there any hands I'm missing that have been waving frantically? No.
As your eyes, you're okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Greg Baldwin from Three Stones Media. Maddie, you talked about the importance of gold standards. Emily, you talked about responsibility. Everybody on stage is doing the right thing. You're putting out the positive vibe. As Cedric, you talked about putting kids forefront, and Maddie, you talked about moderation. But I wonder if part of the problem is the fact that the frustrations we feel is the fact that a lot of adults and authorities don't actually understand what public service is.
Yeah. What do? Do you create a handbook and sort of, I mean, but that handbook would have to go out to, I guess, every parent as well as every producer as well as every creator in the world to get everybody aligned.
I think it's
maybe it's not a bad idea.
It is an issue, and Greg and I have talked about this, but I think these conversations and your input can help inform the stuff that people like CMF who have got access to policymakers can do. But I think you're right, Greg, and I think it's always been the case that the lack of understanding about, not just about how children consume, but about the great big industry of producers behind it. There's a big job to be done there. Is there any more questions? Has anybody else got a question? Do wave your hand. Did I see a hand half go up there and then go down again? Yes, there is one here. There's a tentative half finger here.
Sorry, Greg pretty much asked the same question, but just on top of that, I wonder... Who
are you?
I'm sorry, Jonathan, TV producer from Ireland, and one thing that was always very useful as a producer was knowing what those standards were, working with the public service broadcaster, and going back to the golden age of public broadcasts for children, Fred Rogers and Sesame Street and things like this, there was a lot of research and things that went into that said not only this is valuable, but this is entertaining for children. And you mentioned a handbook, but maybe something as a branch of a regulator to say this is research that goes into this. We know this is educational, this is informative, and this is entertaining, but can be used across media. Might be interesting. So
that's a very good idea.
So we're not producers or commissioners, but we've published guidelines. We've worked with Common Sense Networks to come up with guidelines like helping creators of kids' content on YouTube understand what is quality content, including per stage of development, because kids is not one audience, obviously. So that's one step.
Maybe, sorry.
It's that balance between what works versus what's right, you know, and it's that Love Island thing again, where just because the content works doesn't mean that it's enriching or positive, you know, for your mental health or whatever.
Yeah.
Even though it's addictive and
can prompt some really interesting and important questions between parents and older kids about.
Yeah, but it's trying to find, for me, coming from the Disney background, coming from like the evil corporation or whatever, I always think that if you can find a business model to do what's right, that's the most powerful thing. If you can find great content that's enriching that works, then that's it meets that public service value, but it's not, you know, it doesn't feel like broccoli, right? Like it still feels like it's great content. That is what you strive for. I think there does need to be more help in either curating, surfacing all of that content that works but isn't right and isn't additive, and that's a unique responsibility we have in kids media that, you know, no other genre has, because they don't have audience-driven genres like we do.
Well, we live in a world where anybody can become a content creator immediately right now with a phone in your pocket, and anybody has the potential to blow up like overnight. You could suddenly become viral with kids' content, and that's just the world we live in. So I do wonder if there needs to be some kind of, even if it's like basic training or basic thing you have to read and go through, steps you go through before you are permitted to upload something that's made for kids.
That training stuff happens within broadcasters and very little else.
And it's there, but it's voluntary, the guidebooks.
We are going to have to stop here for several reasons. One is my watch is nagging me about standing up. Next in cinema for our final session of the conference, The Last Word they've already been mentioned in this session. Jamie Amore, the guru behind Cosmic Kids Yoga. Do come back here, 3:30 for the last word. This isn't the last session, there's the last word, which will be brilliant. Before you do go, thank this lot, they've been brilliant. What a great panel.